We can measure time, but we cannot measure loss. As a free society, we have an obligation to never forget the sacrifice of those fallen officers and their families. Their memories must never be forgotten. On May 15th, we will gather on the west front of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. to honor our fallen brothers and sisters of law enforcement who have made the ultimate sacrifice. Attended by thousands and televised on C-SPAN for the world to see, the National Fraternal Order of Police will host its annual National Peace Officers Memorial Service. Planning for this event is a year-long labor of love for a small army of selfless volunteers. Today, we're joined by Glenda Lehmann, President of the National Fraternal Order of Police Auxiliary Board. An extension of the National Fraternal Order of Police, the Auxiliary works hand in hand with concerns of police survivors during the week-long events that make up Police Week in Washington, D.C. I am Patrick Yoes, National President of Fraternal Order Police. This is the Blue View. Well, Glenda, thanks for joining us on the Blue View. You've been here before, but some of our viewers and listeners may not know you. So how about telling them a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm the National President for the FOP Auxiliary. I've been involved with the FOP a little over 30 years. Got involved when I met my husband, who was active in the FOP, and it just kind of became a way of life, if you will. And for us, it was more about making sure that we were supporting not only the law enforcement officers in his agency, but being able to support law enforcement and their families across the country. And so I've just spent a lot of time on a local, state, and national level being involved in different programs, whether that was for benefits, whether that was for better working environments for the officers, or just making sure that as the officers were going through different types of events or experiences, that we were there to support the families, because when that officer goes through those types of things, the families are also going through those types of things. So for me, it was being able to be involved with other people that experienced the same types of things, understood kind of what I was going through as well as what our family was going through. And so working over the last 30 years with just being able to be a friend, but also be a support, and making sure that we had peer support available across the board, and just growing the membership within the organization.
So this is very much a family business, and that's why the FOP has an auxiliary. But for those that don't know about the auxiliary, I know you've already, kind of outlined exactly what they do. But tell us a little bit more about the auxiliary itself, and who are the members, and what do they do across the country?
Sure. So while we're a nationally chartered organization, we do have auxiliaries across the country. We have 105 local chapters that actually cover 26 states with just local chapters. But then we have there's 25 states that actually have state organizations. But the auxiliary in itself is open to any family member of an FOP member who is 18 years of age or older. So I think there's a lot of people that think that it's strictly just for spouses or just for wives, but it's actually any family member over the age of 18. And across the country, it's a number of different things. It's really supporting the law enforcement profession, but also the Fraternal Order of Police, whether that's through fundraising efforts because there are needs from members, whether it's from natural disasters or personal tragedies or incidences that happened during the line of duty. It's also working towards better pay, better benefits, better working environments, making sure that there is support systems in place. A lot of our auxiliaries have started financial accounts or funds so that they can have monies available to the officer or to the family in the event that there's something that happens in the line of duty, whether they're injured and just off work, whether they're disabled, whether there's a death. And so it's being able to put together programs to support them in that regard as well. So it kind of runs through whatever the need happens to be for that group in that area, whether it's for that agency or for that FOP. Or for those members, it's being able to put programs and things together and quickly shifting, if you will, to make sure that we're providing that support when that support's needed.
Yeah, so it's pretty much it's the personality of the chartering lodge.
Yes.
If an FOP lodge would like an auxiliary, all they have to do is just reach out, contact you, and help them get it chartered. And they basically work with that lodge. So each one looks different,
Correct.
and they're all doing things that are important in the local communities. Supporting that lodge. What I really want to talk to you about is something that just blows me away. In all of my years in law enforcement, this is, the Fraternal Order of Police has hosted a peace officers memorial service on the lawn of the Capitol, and what an absolutely amazing event. I think most people don't realize just how much work goes into the planning of doing an event that size. On any given May 15th, we'll have 30, 40,000 people there at the Capitol honoring and showing respect to our fallen. Well, we honor every law enforcement officer. And I guess what makes ours unique is that every family participates. They place a flower and they're presented with a medal, and they have some involvement in it so to function. But I think most people show up at this and say, you know what, it just happens. But in reality, it is a small army. Doing is creating a series of podcasts that break down some of the functions that are done. And then a huge factor of this is what is done by the auxiliary. Although they may have the personality of their local host lodges across the country, in reality, they're a huge part of supporting a national effort to honor our fallen. So if you could just break it down a little bit on the auxiliary's role that they have in the planning of this small army that makes this happen every year.
Sure. So we have a dedicated committee that's appointed that works year round. They actually start meeting for the following calendar year in September, and then they meet monthly after that. But they're looking at the scope of making sure that from a logistical standpoint, we're able to move anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 family members who are coming in throughout the city. So getting them from their hotels, from where they are, into the Capitol the day of the memorial service, and then making sure that that family that's going to participate and actually place the carnation for their loved one, that they have the experience from support staff to help them walk through this process. It's very emotional. And so for some people, it has been a period of time since their loved one has passed away. And so it brings up new emotions or reopens some of them. For others, it's actual closure. But for the auxiliary standpoint, it's making sure that we are there during the week to support them when they arrive into DC, answering questions for them about what to expect, what's going to happen during that. We also work at registration. We partner with the COPS organization and making sure that we're registering all of the survivors that come in, making sure that they get registered in for the week, that they get the right credentials so that they are able to get to the memorial service and the other events that are happening that week. But in order to make that happen, our committee meets throughout the year and starts planning logistically on what hotels are going to be available for those individuals coming in, whether it's volunteers, whether it is the FOP members or the auxiliary members. We work out the logistics of that and making sure that we have transportation available to move those volunteers as well around the city in order to make sure that they're in place as the event takes place. In addition to that, we have a group that works with several other organizations and actually are reviewing the names as the names of the officers are submitted for consideration for the service. So they actually meet to look at the research and the information that's done around that officer's death and determining whether that officer is qualified to actually be honored during the May 15th service. They actually meet year round and continuously looking at names that are submitted. So unfortunately, because while we hope that there's one day that we never have to have a service, we recognize that unfortunately there is a need for it each year. So we want to make sure that we're honoring our heroes and those law enforcement officers. And we want to make sure that we're providing a service that says to the family that we recognize your officer's sacrifice. We recognize your sacrifice as a family member. And we want them to know that their loved one is not forgotten and that we stand there to continue to support them.
I've coordinated a few things in my days. As simple as a vacation, trying to get just a family to go to one place and be in one place at the same time. But how many people did you say that are moved by bus and brought in a specific location that they have to be in an order so that they can sit in a certain seat so they can be recognized at a certain time? How many?
So it averages, depending on the number of family members that come in, but it usually averages between 4,000 to 6,000 that we're moving. And so that includes the immediate family members that are participating in the service, as well as extended family members and coworkers and friends that are actually coming into the site to be there to witness the actual service. And so it's coordinating moving them from different hotels and making sure that we have buses running from hotels down to the Capitol, buses running from hotels to our host hotel, and then getting them from the host hotel down to the Capitol, and then making sure that they all, again, get into the service area, making sure that they're
exact location,
that they're stay together. Because the most important thing is when your officer's name is read, is making sure that you're walking and placing the flower for your officer. And that's the most important thing.
Right. Yeah. I asked you just to repeat that because I'd like for our viewers and listeners to wrap their head around the fact that we're talking several thousand people that have to be on a specific bus, sitting in a specific chair at a memorial service, and moved at a certain time so it could start at a certain time. And most of those buses have to go through security clearance before they can even get on a bus. Yes. Because it's a secure area, because more often than not, the President of the United States speaks at this memorial service. That in itself is just amazing. I've had the honor, for 20 plus years of being a board member of the National Fraternal Order of Police, of being one of the people who have toughest thing I do, but probably the most rewarding, is to present a medal to families. And look at the emotions that exist, and just recognize that it really comes down to, here's a moment in time where these people will never forget every single word that's uttered and how it's done. And that's pretty powerful. That's pretty powerful that your small army is responsible for that. And I couldn't thank you enough. For years, I'd come to the service and people would pat me on the back and say what a great job I did. And I didn't do anything. I showed up and handed out medals and spoke to families. The work was done by a whole lot of dedicated people. You have your committee. But in addition to the committee and the auxiliary, this doesn't just happen with a handful of people. Talk about the people who every year, at their own cost, their own sacrifice, their own commitment, show up, 100 of them, just on your portion, just to make sure that everything's in place. Talk about those unsung heroes that show up because it's the right thing to do.
So we do have volunteers that come every year. We've got volunteers that have been coming for 20, 30 years participating, and we always have new members that come, but they come in at the beginning of the week, and they're here to work all hours to get things together, make sure programs are together, to make sure we have the blue ribbons, so that the end of the service, when they fly the blue ribbons, that those are available to all of the families. They work all hours at each of the hotels and go out and help at the site. They're available to be able to support the families the day of, with riding the buses, to be there to support them on the buses, helping us make sure that we get everyone into the site and, again, seated in the right place. But I can tell you that most of the volunteers, they hear you talk about the service and they hear you talk about Police Week in DC. But most volunteers, when they come for the very first time, are in such awe of exactly what happens and how it happens, and the significance and the power of being able to say that you were a part of something so large, recognizing our heroes. That most every volunteer that has come in has always said, I will be back next year. Yeah. And the majority of them do pay for the expenses. They take their own time. They pay their own expenses to come in order to be here to support and give back.
Yeah, I'm always blown away by just the generosity of so many people. And you're right. I've often said, people say, I want to go to the memorial service. I want to be part of memorial service, and I give them a warning, and that warning is as well. I'm just going to go ahead and give you fair warning that it's contagious. Once you come, then you're it's going to be it's probably be a life's quest after that. It's very rewarding to do so. And again, I'm in such awe to watch so many people working towards one common goal. And honoring fallen, making some sense out of the senseless for a lot of families. Just absolutely moving. Let's talk about this year's service. This year's service, I know the planning is underway. How many names are we anticipating this year being honored at our memorial service?
This year's memorial service, we will actually be reading 443 names of fallen. When we bring in the volunteers for that, we will actually have the Medal of Honor brought in, and we'll have volunteers that will hand inspect each one of those to ensure that they're in pristine condition, that the spelling is right, that everything is in place, so that when those are actually presented to the families, they're presented without any flaws or any issues with those.
Yeah, amazing. Even down to calling the names to make sure that they're pronounced right. Just the attention to every detail. It's a finely oiled machine that just does some great work.
Yeah. Our name readers take reading the names very seriously. It's very honorable for them. And so they take the time throughout the week to meet with the families to make sure that they have the pronunciations correctly, so that when the name is read, it's pronounced correctly, or pronounced in whether it's a given name or whether it's a nickname, however the family wants to hear that name read, but they spend the time to make sure that they read it correctly.
And Glenda, 443 names, that's a lot of names. For years I've been coming and recognize those numbers have been climbing. Technology, ballistic technology, and medicine, modern medicine has really impacted the numbers. They went down at times, but then we had a few events. 9/11 had a tremendous impact, and now COVID. 443 names. Can you kind of break down who those 443 names are?
Yeah, so this year, I've got the breakdown with me. With this year with COVID, there was the largest group of officers, which was 205. The next group was those who died due to gunshot related instances, which was 74. We do have 9/11, which was a total of 64 officers related to 9/11 related illnesses with that. 58 from automobile or motorcycle incidences. And then we had 26 that fall under the Hometown Heroes heart related. And then 15 are from other causes. And then we have one that's actually suicide.
You hit a couple of categories there. I would imagine that the COVID, since the COVID pandemic is passed, we'll see those numbers drastically drop. But 9/11 every year, people who worked the pile, people who responded on 9/11 are dying of illnesses directly related to that event. It's probably not going to slow down, is it?
So with the 9/11 ones, it's actually kind of holding steady. The number of individuals that responded to the scene and the exposure that they had, we're still seeing the effects of the cancers that have been diagnosed and the impact that it's having on those. So that's kind of holding steady, and don't see so much of a drop as we anticipate that we'll see with COVID.
Glenda, one of the things that's always moved me and going to the memorial service is, of course, everybody has their triggers, the things that really kind of stand out to them. For me, it's the little kids, that come up and, been presented a medal for their father, and it just everything. It just the whole event. Everybody has their emotional connection to all of this. But you work specifically at the Cops Hotel, where all of the survivors are located. They're going through workshops. We're going to have members of cops are going to explain what they do on their side in a different podcast. But it has to be difficult of interacting with people in a very, at this very vulnerable time, and forming pretty good connections, I would imagine, as well. Can you talk about, just as someone who's a volunteer in that role, how rewarding it is, in your opinion, what does this service mean to them?
I think I can say from volunteering all of the years that I've been involved, the connections that you make is at a moment in somebody's life when they're, I don't want to say it's one of the worst moments of their lives, because it's allowing people to come together who have a common bond because of the experience that they've gone through. And they're able to understand one another, kind of be there to support one another for the tragedy that they've experienced. But at the same time, I think those bonds and that support that are being provided that they give to each other, and that we're able to witness and sometimes to be a part of, is to see them be able to grow. If I don't know if even that's the right word, but to see them be able to find a positive in that moment by having that connection and that support from others. And I think for me, it's being able to make a difference, even if it's a very small difference, when during a point in time when someone is struggling so much, to be able to give back and be able to be that piece of support for them. Most recent years, I was able to help a spouse who was here by herself and was waiting for the escort officer that they were anticipating to arrive to be with them for the week. And being by herself, it was, extremely difficult. She was going through lots of the emotions and the different things that were happening. And she was just looking for someone to have that connection, to give her that support at that moment. And it was an experience that you had to have gone through to truly understand it. But it was at a moment when she walked towards the table where we were at for support services. And when she walked up, it was that look that you give someone without ever having to say anything, but to know that there's a connection there. And then a hug that we shared that was probably worth more than $1 million and said more than 1,000,000 words. And I've had the opportunity to see that survivor again at a following year's service. And again, there wasn't anything that had to be spoken. Again, it was just the seeing each other, being able to look in each other's eyes and give that hug. And I think it's, for me, that's why I do what I do.
Well, I could tell you, just having watched the work that's done, there's something very powerful happens during Police Week. It's families coming together and talking with people who know the struggle, because it's real for them as well. Finding comfort in each other, finding strength in each other, and finding ways to take that tragedy and turn it into some positives in helping others. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also a part of closure. You're reaching a point where the recognition of their loved one is here at our nation's capital, on the lawn of the Capitol, in many cases with the President of the United States present, certainly a lot of dignitaries. And I think all of it is just a very important part of the grieving process for those families, and the work that your crew, your small army does. I'm forever grateful. And I know that it comes from the heart of every one of them. I've watched it and repeatedly over and over and over. If someone wants to know more about the memorial service, if they may want to be a volunteer, if they're interested in auxiliary, starting an auxiliary within their lodges across the country, what would be the best way for them to make contact to explore that option?
So actually, they can go out to the FOP's website, and underneath the auxiliary pages, there are links both to the memorial information, as well as to the executive boards and the trustees. And then, of course, we have the policeweek.org site that they can go to as well. And there's links there to actually ask questions and It will immediately get them in contact with our chairperson, Julie Black, for the auxiliary, and then our executive board contacts are on there as well.
Okay. Well, Glenda, is there any final parting thoughts you'd like to offer to our viewers?
I would just say that if you've never been to Police Week, I invite you to come and witness a service that is very rewarding and honoring, but also the opportunity to support our fellow families for the sacrifices that they've made and the sacrifices that the officers have made. So I encourage them to give that serious consideration, invite them to come and attend a service, and then consider volunteering as well.
With fair warning, if you come once, you're coming back.
Absolutely.
Without a doubt. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in to the Blue View podcast, where we talk about the issues that are so vitally important to the men and women who suit up and show up in communities across this country every single day. Thank you.
Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. To get the latest from the National FOP, make sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at GLFOP and on Instagram at FOP National. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.